Welcome back to the Plugged In channel. We are coming at you here this week with a brand new series, Big Wade Wednesday, where we're going to sit down with Big Wade here and just pick his brain on some of his knowledge of the program and his experience with our sober living houses. We're super excited to get it rolling, so let him introduce himself.
My name is Wade. They call me Big Wade, or they call me Senior. And I'm going to qualify this real quick. My son's name is Wade. We're not a senior and a junior. Mine's Wade Allen. His is Wade Aaron. I named him after me, so my ex-wife could never forget my name, and it's really working.
Yeah, the better looking one, huh?
Hey.
Yeah, there you go.
Be, right?
Yeah, someone's got to do it.
Legendary.
We're legendary. Be original. That's another story for another time. I'm sure you'll hear it. But we're going to kick this series with a topic that is so prevalent in the sober living game as well as just in recovery in general. Relapses. Guys going back out, coming back, what that looks like. So we're going to just get your thoughts on relapsing and go from there.
My thoughts on relapse, when I see guys do it, and I've always heard, relapse is going to happen, failure to enlarge your spirituality, right? So if you come in the program and you're just doing status quo, you're going to relapse. It's about coming in and learning new things. In my story, I tell people that God brought me to AA, and it was AA who brought me to the God of my understanding, which, this little God talk here may scare some people off, and it scared me off at first also. It has nothing to do with religion. God to me has nothing to do with religion. That's a whole separate part. In AA's preamble, through the grapevine, it talks about, no affiliation with religion, sect, denomination, politics, or organization, right? So we got to talk about God when we talk about relapse, because that is a solution in the program.
And you bring up a good point as far as differentiating spirituality from religion. And I think that's a big hang-up for a lot of people. They have a prejudice against a God. Maybe it's from their upbringing. Maybe it's because of just all the things that happen in their life. Let's start there and then lead into what eventually leads to a relapse, which is failing to enlarge on the spiritual aspect.
So for me, again, when we talk like this, Eric, we share our experience, strength, and hope, right? And all I can tell you is, my story from myself and what I see in other guys. So, when I first came in to AA, let's back up and let's say prior to coming into AA, the only prayers, I grew up, my dad taught us how to pray, right? I taught my kids how to say the same prayers. They still say them to this day, which is great. But as you get successful in life, all of a sudden, God isn't that important anymore. We start running on self-will, self-propulsion. I'm doing all this myself. There is no more asking God for guidance or direction. It's all about I'm doing all this. I'm getting all the credit. And I'm just out here running and gunning. The only prayers that I had were 911 prayers or foxhole prayers. And for me, they were more like 911 prayers, and I had God on speed dial, right? I hit the button. I want him to hang up. God, it's wait, I need you, and I need you now, right? Those were the only prayers that I had. Mm-hmm. And so going through my whole story, which you'll hear someday, I died 6 minutes, 50 seconds. I had a experience, out-of-body experience, let's say. And it really brought me to God when I came to. Seen my daughter days later, hadn't had a relationship with her for 7 years. First thing she said to me is at night, she was with me. I was on 11 machines, tubes everywhere, and she said, "Dad, do you want to pray?" And I had tears in my eyes. I said, absolutely. I couldn't even fold my hands. She had to help fold my hands. That's about 10 years and 10 months ago, and I've been praying ever since. And where I used to just pray at night, I actually pray in the morning now, which is a new concept for me. So coming into the rooms, like I said, it was God who brought me to AA, and AA who brought me to the God of my understanding, which was key. Because all I grew up with was a religious God. We were Presbyterian. My ex-wife was Catholic. It was God would help you, but fearful. I wasn't the best of kids growing up. I heard a lot of God's going to get you and you're going to hell, right? I come into a program, I laugh now, and there must have been a time or two where I was a good kid and I should have heard, "Oh, you're going to heaven, Wade. God loves you," right? But I never heard any of that. right? So I was fearful of God. And what I'm finding out, because every day you enlarge your spirituality, is I never had a personal relationship with God. I just had this religious God. So coming into the rooms and in AA, when they told me I could have the God of my understanding, my own concept of God, I have that biblical God, Jesus, the whole 9 yards. But it's so much more. It has expanded so much more. And for my own personal program, coming in here, when I heard guys talk about the key to this is finding the God of your understanding, spirituality, building faith. Faith without works is dead. It's like when you first meet somebody. How much faith do you really have in them? You really don't. They say they're going to do all these things or can do all these things or maybe, but you really don't know till you start putting the work in with them and you start seeing it. And that's the key. You have to be willing to put in the work. They talk in here about, how it works. Honesty, open mind, and willingness, right? So with that saying, that's how the program works. It starts on page 58. When you start talking about who, go back to page 567, 568 in the big book, who starts out with willingness, honest, and open-mindedness. Well, whenever you're talking about who, we're talking about God. That's who works this program. That's who works things for me.
Right. No, and it's funny you mentioned that too, because going back to where you just had a religious concept of God, and then coming into AA, you had why don't you choose your own conception of God? And then they talk about that when Bill's story, when he's sitting at that table with Abby, and then he's like, well, he just suggested, why don't you just try your own conception of God? And then what is it, the icy intellectual mountaintop slow mounted away or whatever it is, but that's what they were talking about, right? Where it's like, okay, well, why don't you just choose your own conception and start building on top of that? Now, that is the main reason of the program. Let's try to tie that into what we wanted to talk about today, which is relapse. What do you see most within the guys at the houses and people in the program when they start failing to enlarge on that spiritual aspect that leads them back to relapse?
What I see in it is fear, and I'll touch on that in a minute. So when I was introduced to the program and to the big book, the sponsor that I had at the time pounded me down with this on page 45 in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, which is the same big book every other program that ends in A uses except for NA, right? Page 45, it says, the main object of this book is for you to find a power greater than yourselves that'll help you solve all your problems. Not just your drink and drug problems, but all your problems. And so here comes the word fear. I was fearful of that, right? Really, I was in disbelief. I'm going to find this God and I'm going to go all in and I'm going to buy into this and all my problems are going to be solved. I'm smart enough to look around me, and when I see success, I want to follow it, right? If a guy's making a lot of money and I want to invest in something, he says, if you do it just like this is going to work for you. And so I think everybody comes into the program and they see people where it's working and you start buying in. So that fear started to crop in, right? Again, I'll shoot things from the big book, right? Again, that's on page 45. You turn around and that page 567, 568, like I talked about, talks about a spiritual experience. And having this talk and going back to this is what makes guys real uncomfortable in the program, especially when they're new, right? There may be, we dedicate that chapter, we agnostics, right? To the atheist, to the agnostic, this will work. 99% of the people, however, find that God of their understanding. They get over that hump, they get over that fear. They have a sponsor, they have mentors, they go to the program, and there it is, right? Step 2 in the program says, came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. And it was presented to me, wait, are you willing to believe that, right? Well, what's your belief? Did someone create all this? How did things happen? You buy into step 2 that there is a power greater than myself. Step 3, we make a decision to turn our will and our life over the care of God as we understand Him. Key part for me again. And I hammer it down to people. God as you understand Him. And once again, as we're talking here, why not try? I tried everything else and it didn't work. My self-will, my self-propulsion, I was failing at everything. And again, it led back to fear. So again, small things, page 417 in the big book to 420. Most sponsors will have you read it. It's called acceptance, right?
Yep.
There's a few parts I can touch on that, but fear was a big thing in it. Right? So with fear, AA's famous for these little acronyms, right? There's 3 of them that were pounded into my head right away and then explained to me. The first one with fear was fuck everything and run. The second one was face everything and recover. And the next one was false evidence appearing real, right? So coming into the room as an addict alcoholic, my life in chaos, destruct everything, loss of a 27-year career, a 30-year marriage, friends, family, everything else, financial ruins. Wow, I was in fuck everything and run mode. How could I face this? It's so overwhelming. The chaos, the feelings that people feel, right? How am I ever going to get out of this? You mean to tell me if I believe in this God, if I buy into this concept and do these few things, things will change? We'll touch on that in a second, right? The next one is false evidence appearing real, right? So much of this was manufactured in my own head. They're never going to forgive me. I'm never going to be able to solve this problem. I'm going to do this and all this stuff is going to happen. I'm never going to be able to get out of this, And the next one is right there, false evidence appearing real. Face everything and recover. If I face this stuff head on, recovery becomes easy. I clean up the messes in my past. I don't have all this anxiety hanging over my head and depression, all the guilt and the shame that I felt. I make amends in these relationships. All these false things like I'll never be forgiven, I'll never have a relationship. I can't go back and I can't change the past, right? But by bringing God into my life, and here's where it is where guys relapse. See, I come out here and I go to meetings. First they suggest 90 meetings, 90 days, right? I thought I was great, 42 days. 42 days, I went to Frank and I said, got my 90 days, got my 90 meetings in. And he said, hey, that's great. How many meetings do you think you're going to have now when you hit your 90 days? I was like, what are you talking about? He's like, it's 90 meetings and 90 days. It's just not a race. This is for your life, right? And when I found out it's again, back on this subject about relapse, this is for the rest of my life. It's for the rest of your life. It's building a program. It's building a program with God. And so here's where it starts. That's that honesty, open-minded, and willingness. Am I willing to believe in this? That step 2, that power greater than myself. Yeah, I start looking around the rooms, and I see these people with 1 month, and that's huge when you come in here and you only have 3 days or 7 days, and then you see the guys that have 3 months and 6 months and a year, and it's like at first I was like, oh, impossible. Yeah. Who could go a year? And then you hear, I got 3 years and 10 years, and all of a sudden you hear these old timers pop up that they got 30 and 40 years, and my first thought there is, you're lying.
Yeah.
Bullshit. First of all, who would want to be sober for 40 years? This can't be no fun,
right?
But then you see the book talks about they're happy, joyous, and free. Mm-hmm. All these problems that they share about that they were once like me are gone. So the business side of me says, well, how did you get rid of it? And in comes this God thing, and they start talking about relapse, right? So in my 10 years and 10 months, in the program we talk about yets. I've yet to relapse. And I say yet because all we have is today, right?
Yeah.
And so with that, a lot of people relapse, and here's where we're coming into it. Why do you relapse? Well, they say resentment is the number one offender, right? Well, that can be the number one offender, but what I see the number one reason where people relapse is they stop going to meetings. They stop doing the work. They stop giving back. See, when you go to meetings, you're actually helping other people, not just yourself. You're not just learning things. You turn around and you're helping a newcomer that comes in, and all of a sudden you're sharing that you got a 30-day chip, and he thinks you're God, right? Wow, how did you get that, right? And after the meeting, you're talking to him. And here's the type of person I was, right? I was so locked up on my character defects, and shortcomings. Then I got to tell a quick story about that, right? So Frank the guy sponsoring me, gave me a quick overview of the program. And he said to me, wait, here's things we're going to talk about. We're going to get into step 4 and 5, the shortcomings and character defects. And I'm kind of like on a blank, and he says, do you have any shortcomings? And actually, I thought for about a minute or two, and I said, no, Frank, I don't have any, right? and he kind of smiled, and he says, character defects, shortcomings? I thought again for about a minute, and I said, no. He said, do you need a dictionary? And I smiled because I said, yeah, I do. And he said, well, you are honest. Right? Yeah. I had no idea what a character defect and a shortcoming was. I was an addict and an alcoholic. Not a conversation I don't believe we ever had in the bar,
right?
Or sitting at the table. Why would we? You know?
You're not sitting there talking about selfishness and self-centeredness just in everyday life.
No. I mean, I'm Big Wade.
Yeah.
Right? I'm full of ego and I'm full of pride. I'm selfish. I'm self-centered. I run on fear and anger. I manipulate situations, right? I justify everything that I do. The word justify is just a lie, right? Mm-hmm. And I become dishonest. And so I continue to dig holes, and I dig them deeper. And I feel like I have no way out. And so I run on that. And the book, again, touches on that part of it. We step on the toes of others, and they retaliate. Well, you step on the toes of me, and depending on what you did, I'm selfish and I'm self-centered, right? My ego comes out, my fear comes out, my pride, and I'm off to the races. Mm-hmm. And so that's my cycle that I learn as we talk later on that I have to watch. Now, back on the relapse, this all plays a big part of it because I don't know what my character defects are. I have no idea, didn't even know what the words were. And this is what I really drank and used over, right? Situations, because it was all about me. I was selfish and self-centered, though I thought I was this giving guy. And I really was. I was the type of guy who would buy your drinks. Mm-hmm. I'd give you drugs. My family had everything they wanted, from money to possessions to whatever they could. I just wanted to get people out of my way so I could continue to drink and use. I didn't really have God in my life. He was never there. He was never there in the morning. He was never there at night. So when I see these guys relapse, these are some of the conversations that I have with them and I look for in them. Where's God in your life, right? Because God used to only be an occasional thought of mine when I was in trouble or needed help, right? And growing up, he was just someone that I prayed to at night, Again, going into things in the big book, breaking them in, like if you were new like this, I buy you a big book, I take you to page 86 to 88. Right? I bend over the corner and I say, you might not be able to get to 90 meetings in 90 days, but I know you can read page 86 to 88 for 90 days. Going to take you 3 to 5 minutes, read it slowly, let it sink in. What we're going to do here is we're going to build new habits that you didn't have before. Again, trying to get you out of that selfish, self-centered thing. And that's why you go to meetings. You're actually doing God's work. You're not drinking, you're not drugging, you're not being selfish. Now you're spending this hour and a half at a meeting talking to a newcomer. You think it's easy to talk about relapse, about the problems that you created in your life? It's not. It dredges up the past. But, that's the key to things. And it says in the book, and then there's a daily reflections that I really like. The key to my future is to unlock my past, right? To come out here and to share what happened to me in my life, to break down my ego, to break down my pride, right? To let you hear the sick and suffering that I had when people would look at me and thought my life was just all great. You know what? You were seeing what I wanted you to see. I was hiding all the rest. That's what alcoholics and addicts do. We really manipulate situations. We're professional manipulators. And then we justify our actions. And so relapse, where does it happen? Right there in the start, like you say in the program and stuff. I see these guys, and I'll touch on the sober living part. They come into the houses, right? We want you at 4 meetings a week. You have to have a sponsor. You have to be working a program, whichever one it is. You have to do your chores. We're trying to bring structure back into your life. Something that when we moved out of our parents' house, we all had. We knew how to get our apartment going, right? It took structure, right? I had to pay my rent or I was going to get evicted. I had to keep it clean because I wanted people over. I had to have good hygiene. I had to have a job. Well, okay, so now that we know all these things, Let's talk about how we relapsed and what happened. All my money went to booze and drugs and women. I got evicted. Hygiene goes down the hill. I'm not cleaning the house anymore. And so all of a sudden you're doing this for years, and that just becomes a way of life, right? That's your structure. So at Sober Living, at Plugged In, we try to bring accountability and structure into our program, right? You're accountable for your actions. We start at Plugged In, the three of us, leadership by example. I'll never ask you to do something that I won't do myself. I personally do 5-6 meetings a week. I do some IOPs. I'm out here helping the guys, giving them rides. This is, again, God's work. And where does this relapse happen? Failure to enlarge your spirituality, doing God's work, is going to lead to relapse. And so these guys who are going to meetings, first they kind of shuck it off, right? So some of them are gung-ho about it, like I was. And you can usually see, you can separate the winners from the guys who really aren't trying. Some guys got in so much trouble, they're kind of like sentenced to there. And it's like, okay, so where's relapse going to happen? Relapse is going to happen if you don't buy into this program, this simple program that builds a spiritual toolkit. What are you doing to build this? Are you going to meetings? Are you working with a sponsor? Are you starting in on these steps? What are your beliefs? They're curious of how other guys get sober. Now you're in a sober living house and you have 11 guys in that house. So you have 10 other roommates that are holding you accountable. Are you going to meetings? Hey, let's go to meetings. We have a deal called Group Me. All the guys are on there and they're talking about what times they're going to meetings. So there's no reason you can't go to a meeting and make this work. And that's kind of our job, accountability again, and structure. We structure the house. We help structure your life. You come in the house, you got to pay rent. You got to pick up after yourself.
Right. And I wanted to chime in here too, because it's like that's a big part of like when people do relapse, but then also a big part of it is coming back to the program, getting back into sober living, going back to detox, and the pride and ego. When you do have some time and you learn a little bit about the program and then you go back out, it becomes a lot harder to come back, because it's like you got a head full of AA, belly full of beer, and you feel all this shame and guilt, and like you don't want to show face because you relapse. And it's very hard, the more times that you do that, to continuously come back and try. Like in your experience, what do you see people struggling with when they try to come back to sober living, get back into detox, and like get back into the program?
So when they come back into the program and this happens, my hat's off to them. Like I said, I don't know what relapsing is like yet and having to start out, but I do know me. The pride and the ego that are in me, I think would crush me. Yeah. I would like to think that I could learn from my mistake. God's will for me would bring me back, His guidance and direction. So for these guys that I see that come into the rooms and come into sober living, again, my hat's off to you. I know it's not easy. We do H&Is, hospitals and institutions meetings up at Buena Vista. Great place, right? We do one on the residential side and one on the detox side. For those people who don't know, the detox side is when you first are in there, let's say your first 1 to 7 days, and you're and you're fighting this disease that until it touches your family or a loved one, you really don't get it.
You don't know what it's like to be sick. Just sit and detox. It's not a good time.
And for the families, it was like ours, right? Nobody knew a lot about me. But when they find out about it, it's the stigma. Oh my God, he's an addict, right? Yeah. And back in my day, I was a meth addict, right? Oh my God, truth be told, it was cocaine and meth, right? Yeah. I was an alcoholic. Thought I was fooling some people. And I was, but a lot of people knew who I was and what I was about. So for these people who are coming back in the house, I understand their fears. And the talks that I have with them is, this is just your fear and ego. And until you swallow this, which is doing these steps, getting up to the 4th step where you start doing some of your writing and you own your part in things, and then you talk to a sponsor in the 5th step and God and another human being, right? Admit your faults, and you find these character defects on what you do and what makes you tick, you're not going to get it. And so when I explain to them, why do I relapse? I just don't get it. Why can some people make it and some people can't? It's a great thought. And so what I've learned from sponsoring people and sponsoring guys. And I love, for those people who don't know, Joe and Charlie. The only way I can do it is hit the microphone on my phone on Google and say, Joe and Charlie, the doctor's opinion, right? And these two old guys come up and they explain every chapter in the big book you can do this to. And I recommend, and I send it to the link to my sponsors, people who I sponsor all the time. So you get into Joe and Charlie. And here's where you really have to think things through. It was hammered in my head that you got to think the drink and the drug through. See, I
play the tape forward.
Play it forward. I came to AA for my drinking. I stay for my thinking. I'm sober now, right? But I stay for my thinking because these thoughts, I'm human, always crop up, right? So getting into this, if you go to the Roman numeral page 27 to 31, under the doctor's opinion, Joe and Charlie explain it the best I've ever heard it, right? They explain that we have an allergy and a disease in our body, right? And my sponsor said, do you believe that? Absolutely, right? There has to be something different about me. Why can some people just do it occasionally? Why can some people just have a few drinks, right? And it talks about it in there, do you see yourself here? Do you see yourself there? And I knew with just the questions that were asked in that thing where my life was unmanageable, right? But again, why was I drinking and drugging? Well, the allergy and the disease was set off by the obsession of the mind and the phenomenon of craving.
Right.
And so for people who don't understand what that means is, see, I don't have an off switch. I can't just have one. One's not enough and 1,000's too many. Once I do a little bit of drug, I can't stop there. The obsession of my mind and the phenomenon of craving, I need more. I just have to have more.
Right.
I can't have just one or two drinks. I remember people saying to me, Wade, why can't you just have one or two? Why would I? I mean, who would want to stop at one or two?
Right.
I didn't know that I had this allergy and disease in my body. And so they go on and they explain it really good. It's like, listen, if you're allergic to strawberries, you break out in hives. For you, Wade, you're allergic to alcohol and drugs. You break out in handcuffs when you do it.
Oh, yeah.
Right? I had my share in my moments with them, but no, I break out with the phenomenon of craving and the obsession of the mind, and then I chase it. And once it's back in the body and the memories are fresh, it's there. And here comes, why did this relapse happen? Because failure to enlarge my spirituality. That relapse actually happened weeks prior. I wasn't praying in the morning and the night. I wasn't hitting meetings. I wasn't helping people. When I got sober, they told me if I could do these 5 things, if I just did these 5 things, I stood a great chance of being sober. Okay, so what is it? And explain it to me. All right? Upon awakening in the morning, this is where that page 86 says, I want you to ask God for guidance and direction throughout the day. Think you can do that? Well, what does that mean, guidance and direction? Because I just wake up and hit the ground running because I know what to do. And they're like, yeah, Captain Chaos, let's start your day off, right? Okay, so what does it look like? Well, ask God for guidance and direction. What would you have me do today? How would you have me do it? Direct my thinking, thoughts, my actions, and my words. Now you're praying, so now stop and just kind of listen. Here's that meditation part. See what God says. God says, can you pray for the guys, Wade, who are sick and suffering? Guys in the houses who've relapsed? New people at meetings? Can you do that? Yeah. Can you maybe pour coffee at the meeting? Can you chair the meeting? Can you talk to some newcomers? Yeah, I can do that. All right, what's next? Read something out of AA material, out of the big book, Daily Reflections. Can you do that? That'll take a couple minutes. Yeah, I can do that. Can you talk or text another alcoholic, get out of self? Hey, how are you doing today? Yeah, I can do that. Now the 4th one, this is a hard one. Can you make it to a meeting? Yeah, that's pretty tough. Well, wait a minute. Is it that tough? I mean, how much time, again, did you spend drinking each day? How many times did you spend drugging, chasing the drug, lining it up, and everything you did? You told me you spent hours, 6-8 hours doing this. Yeah, I guess I can do that. Yeah. Right? And now the 5th thing is when you retire at night, give God thanks for the day. But what's that look like? God, thanks for keeping me drug and alcohol free, clean and sober, and managing my life, because without you, none of this is possible.
No.
And that's where it all starts right there. Can you do those 5? And I'm like, well, they're like, can you do 4 of them? Yeah, I can do 4 of them. Well, 4 out of 5 is 80%, and 80% is passing. And if you can do that, why not rinse and repeat? Do it tomorrow, and you'll get another day of sobriety. And one day turns into 1 week, turns into 1 month, turns into a year. Next thing you know, you're picking up an 18-month Weiner chip because you need to chip right in the middle because this is just so hard. And this chip keeps me sober, right? And then you're off to 2 years.
Cool. No, that's I never heard it broken down like that, but I mean 4 out of 5 is pretty good. At least it's a good place to start. Let's wrap things up. I did want to say for anybody who's watching that maybe is fresh off a relapse, maybe somebody's just struggling in early sobriety, do you have any words of encouragement or advice for them?
Yeah. Words of encouragement and advice would be get to a meeting, swallow your ego, swallow your pride, admit right away that you relapsed. It's big in my life and plugged in. One of our things is, you can do anything you want as long as you're responsible for the consequences of your actions. Say that real slow. You want to go out, you want to drink, you want to drug, you're responsible for the consequences of those actions. You fail a UA at the house, a random, you're out of the house, right? That can apply to every single thing in your life. So own it. Ask for help. Swallow the pride, swallow the ego. Get to a meeting. When you're fresh off a relapse, you can help somebody like myself by coming in and talking to us, letting us know that it's still out there, right? That it isn't fun. It helps us get out of ourselves. What can I do to help you? What can I do for you? Maybe we can sit down and we can talk about this doctor's opinion and that you got to think the drink and the drug through before you even pick it up. It's that mental thought. It's that obsession of the mind, that phenomenon of craving. Pick up the phone when you're having these thoughts. There's someone on the other end of the line. They're not just going to pound down, let's say, if you're calling me, I'm not going to pound down a God thing. I'm going to be like, where are you at? Have you been to a meeting? Mm-hmm. Who are you talking with? How can I help you? Maybe give it to you a different way that hasn't been told to you. But the biggest thing in this program is, you got to want it. You really got to want it. And you got to want it for yourself. There's some work involved in it. It's a simple program, but there is work involved in it, like anything else. How bad do you want it? When the rubber meets the road, are you willing to do what it takes to get it done?
Yeah. Well, that's good advice, man, and we appreciate it. I mean, I think that went well for our first Big Weight Wednesday. There's going to be more to come, so but yeah, thanks for sitting down with us. For everyone watching, make sure to subscribe to the channel, follow us, Plugged In Recovery on all platforms, AZ Sober on TikTok, and yeah, we'll see you next week.
Wait a minute.
Oh,
for those of you who don't know, AZ Sober, they have these little acronyms, right? And here's one I came up with, right? That AZ Sober stands for Arizona. Son of a bitch, everything is real.com. and that'll take you to Plugged In Recovery, and that's what we do here.
You heard it here first. Okay, thanks. We'll see you next week.